This is Gerardo Del Real along with my co-host, the insightful, the intelligent, the visionary, Mr. Nick Hodge, and this is episode 17 of Bizarro World. How are you, Nick?
I'm doing really well, Gerardo. Better than the gold price. How are you?
I am doing great. I watched my first episode of Game of Thrones, I'll have you know.
That's a racist show. We'll talk about it.
Oh, we're going to start with the racist show. I like it. The majors continue to make strategic investments at significant premiums. The market continues to not care. We'll talk about that. It's not just the gold space. It's the copper space. It's the lithium space. I'm talking premiums of 30, 40, 50%. And again, it's been met with a yawn. So we'll definitely get into that. I want to talk Radius Gold. Had a big hit down in Mexico. I want to talk about community trailers and measles. But first things first, let's talk markets. You mentioned gold. Let's go there. Thoughts?
And Scientologist, when we get to measles, we'll bring it up. Thoughts on gold. I was a little bit more pessimistic than you last week, if you remember.
I do.
We got kind of whipsawed this week. I'm sure you'll talk about the Fed, where they didn't raise rates and gold got all happy for about a minute or two. And then Jerome Powell opened his mouth and said that the risks may not be as much as they once were, and then so gold price reversed course. We went from 1280 something to 1260, high 1260s this morning when I woke up. It's still sort of in that range, but still feeling kind of weak. Gold ETFs are down, leveraged ETFs are down. Companies in the sector are certainly weak, and so I still don't have the warm and fuzzies. What I was going to say about gold when I was thinking about this podcast earlier today is echoing some things we've talked about before, namely that I'm not taking on a lot of new positions and new stories, but rather keeping capital flowing to ones that I am comfortable owning for the long term and comfortable with the share structure and the team and the asset, etc., and ones that I know will be valued higher or re-rated in a different market environment. So those are sort of my thoughts as I see it. It's still a little bit weak.
There's the smart and insightful commentary that we've come to expect from Mr. Hodge. I'm going to, like last week actually, I'm going to continue to take the other side of that and say that I don't actually see us breaking critical support, which I think lies at 1264. I still think this is a consolidation. I know that there was just a report that outlined the fact that central banks bought 145.5 tons of gold. That's the largest Q1 increase, and this is for quarter one, obviously, in global reserves since 2013. ETFs, similar products, they added 40.3 tons in Q1. I would not be surprised if some of the dumping of gold on the market was a result of what's going on in Venezuela. We've talked about that in the past. I've written about it in the past. Regardless of how you feel about President Maduro, the bottom line is it looks like the writing is on the wall for his presidency. And again, it wouldn't surprise me if there was some sort of liquidation going on from that aspect of it. So I still think it's a healthy consolidation. Again, I think the real market to watch is the bond market. We've had 14 straight weeks of U.S.-based investment-grade corporate bond funds increasing in investment in those. And so when I see corporate grade bond funds, investment grade corporate bond funds, US ones, week after week after week for 14 weeks, attracting that capital from overseas, and I see central banks buying to the tune of the largest purchase increase since 2013, I think that bodes well. I do agree that gold is going to be a second half of the year story as we get through this consolidation. But guess what? Next month is June, and I think we're going to be in good shape in the next month or two. We'll see. We'll know in 2 months.
I was just going to say it's only 2 months away, so here we go.
That's it. With that being said, let's talk the Fed briefly. I don't think anybody expected a rate cut on this go round. I do expect one by year end. If you remember November of last year, Fed Chairman Powell, the way he was speaking was a complete different picture than what he actually did a couple of months later. I think we're getting the same thing right now. I think the Fed is out there seeing how receptive the market is to a rate cut. I think the market will force the Fed's hand because the Fed is not going to cut during an election year, which 2020 is here in the U.S. So I think before year end, you see a mini flash crash in the broader U.S. indices. I think it's a head fake. I think it'll be the market demanding the cut. And I think we'll get that cut, and that's where I think gold will really start to break out as the Fed loses the last little tiny bit of credibility that it still has as an institution.
100% the Fed is still trying to set the stage, and I would say didn't want to appear to be catering to a president who very recently was vocal about asking for a rate cut. And so I don't think they wanted to come just in the same week or a couple of days after and look like they were catering to a presidential request. So I don't think the risks have abated like Mr. Powell says. And, I'm with you. I think we cut before we go higher. So again, we shall see.
I like it. Before we talk about the majors making strategic investments, I didn't ask you last week. Did you get a chance to listen to the Little Nas X song, "The Old Country Road"? Is it country?
I'm sure it's country. I mean, come on. And we have talked about how Billboard really has lost credibility, like the Fed, and the numbers don't really matter. And so, yeah, come on, Lil Nas X and Billy Ray Cyrus. I like it.
The Billboard and the Fed sitting in a tree. Let's talk.
Credibility.
Oh, I love it. Look at you. That was a good pivot, Mr. Hodge. Good pivot. I like it. Let's talk the majors continuing to dip their toes in the resource space. It's starting to trickle down now to the juniors. We talked Mill Rock last week. EMX royalties came in pretty much 100% premium to the share price. You can still buy the shares of Mill Rock at 7.5 cents Canadian, despite the fact that EMX came in and paid 14 cents. Chakana Copper just received approximately a 30% premium to its share price. I believe Goldfields came in at, I want to say 51 or 52 cents. Shares are trading right at the 37, 38 cent level Canadian. So 38.5 cents at the close today. So the market really doesn't care what the smart majors, quote unquote, think about the quality of the assets, the quality of the projects. But I think slowly but surely, investors and speculators are going to have to make a decision. And you touched on this a couple of months ago, actually, about you debating whether or not to average down or to just hold your positions and wait until the market turns. I'm more aggressive than the average speculator in the space. I continue to write checks, 15 cents, next one at 10, next one at a nickel. But we'll see. We'll see in the fall time if that strategy is prudent. Have your thoughts changed at all, or have you gotten any clarity on that end?
Hey, boo-boo, you're more aggressive than the average bear. So I was going to talk about, that's funny, right? I was going to talk about Ivanhoe, which was going to be my stock of the week last week, but we didn't get to it. And so in that context, the same thing is going on. You have one of the largest international conglomerates, Chinese company CITC, coming in a couple of weeks ago at something like 30 or 40 cents. Premium to the then share price, putting in a big chunk of change, over $600 million, over $400 million US. And shares of Ivanhoe didn't go there. And you look at Ivanhoe, and they control, three of the best undeveloped assets in the world across multiple commodities and across multiple jurisdictions, with the massive amounts of copper and PGEs and gold and nickel, other things they have at Kamoa, Kakula, and Kapushi and Platreef, and not to mention backed by Robert Friedland with also a strategic investment from Zijin Mining. And so companies like that aren't moving when hundreds of millions of dollars are invested at a premium. And so that just is a magnification of the disconnect we're seeing with the mill rocks and things you talked about, and certainly just a function or a symptom of the market we're in.
Agreed. And it's not just, I mentioned, it's not just the gold space. Chakana Copper, it's a copper gold project. We had news today I want to say earlier today, if I'm not mistaken, of a lithium junior getting, a 47% premium. If I'm not
Hmm.
mistaken, it was West Farmers, which, is moving into the lithium space with purchase of Kidman Resources. So that's a 47% premium. There was a good report out that was forwarded to both you and I about the other junior developers, which trade at lower NAVs, and frankly there's bargains in that space as well. So symptomatic, I think, of just the resource space in general. I don't think Bitcoin at 5,500 now is helping matters. So it's interesting. It's to me, this is the time where you continue to accumulate. I've been saying this for 3 years now. So obviously a lot of stock, a lot of warrants, and hopefully some of those are worth something someday.
I think I read that in my Junior Mining Monthly issue this month.
There you go. I waited to talk about it this week because we had to make sure subscribers read it first.
There you go.
Infrastructure. We talked about. It's funny. I was 2 years early on this too. I wrote about this 2 years ago, but I said the easiest way to appease the citizenry is by rolling out $1 trillion infrastructure plan. I was a bit short on the number. This is a multi-trillion-dollar infrastructure plan that both dominant parties in the U.S. want to play nice with. So they're talking a minimum of $2 trillion in much needed infrastructure. That's got to be good for the base metals. We have news that possibly the U.S. and China are getting closer to a trade deal. That will be positive for base metals. So I think in a month's time, the outlook for copper and zinc will be a lot brighter than it is right now. Thoughts on that, Nick?
I told you all that dead pig fat was going to grease the gears of the trade deal negotiations, and I'm not sure that that's what has done it, but I haven't seen pigs still in the headline, but miraculously we're coming to near conclusion on the trade talks. It's funny how that happens. And also on the infrastructure plan, I was bit taken aback that that wasn't covered more widely. And I think the answer is because it's not divisive, right? You didn't see big headlines about this bipartisan $2 trillion infrastructure plan that Democrats and Trump agreed on. Yeah, of course, the major news outlets wrote about it. But if you recall the day that this news came out, it was all about Barr testifying about the Mueller report, et cetera. And so I think the infrastructure plan is much more interesting than the Mueller report and the Barr testimony because it's really beneficial for the country. It's an actual stimulus that we need, not only to repair a quickly aging and outdated infrastructure when it comes to bridges and roads and water mains and airports and mass transit, but also to get people back to work. If you remember the original stimulus back in the Obama days, right? Shovel-ready projects and green shoots and all that kind of stuff. So I think an infrastructure plan is welcome. It's needed. It's something both people can agree on. And unfortunately, that doesn't grab headlines in the climate we're in. But and then on the backside of that, of course, it needs a lot of metals for a $2 trillion stimulus plan. A lot of iron and zinc and steel and nickel and things like that. So welcome from an investment and demand standpoint as well. And I know it's easy to talk about in an election year, but hopefully this one has some teeth.
Agreed. It seemed to be pretty amicable in an environment that is everything but. I think a little more context is good. A little bit more global context. A trade deal with China allows China to continue to ramp up their stimulus, which again only feeds that demand equation. So yeah, I think if you have your favorite copper junior out there, now is probably a good time during this whole sell in May, go away thing that happens every year. And now it's sell in April, right? But it's probably a good time over the next several months to continue to add to those positions because I think we're going to close the year a lot higher than where we are right now.
Yep, I'm taking the same tact.
All right, let's go Game of Thrones. Let's get to it. So this is my first episode, right? I told you last week I was going to watch one. Everybody said this one was the one to watch. I enjoyed it. I thought that the scenes were beautifully done. I didn't have the emotional connection to the character, so a lot of what was really significant on Twitter and all over the, well, as you like to put it, the water cooler conversation, I wasn't attached because I hadn't seen the characters developed. But I thought it was pretty neat. I thought it was, anytime you start the show, with the lady in the red hood chanting a spell that you can't understand and nobody else can, could be anything. I was like, okay, I'm in. Let me get the popcorn.
They're lighting swords on fire with spells, right? Crazy.
Yeah, what happened with the Night King?
I
thought the Night King was gonna get it. He was supposed to be like, hey, winter is coming, and I'm another generation of lost hope, and man, Arya lit him up.
Yeah, she got him with the Valerian steel dagger right through the little chest protector there. Well, he's been pretty unbeatable for the past couple of seasons since this character has been introduced. I mean, a couple of people have tried to kill him, and he's really shown some strength and an ability to persevere. So I think it was shocking in some respects that he went down. I won't say so easily, but that he went down so quickly there at the end of the episode with one quick swoop from little tough Arya there. But I'm glad you liked it. Let me ask you this. Did you think the show was racist?
I did not.
Did you happen to see the article circulating the next day about how Game of Thrones continues to kill off entire immigrant populations and how that's a problem?
Traditionally, that's how it's been done. And this coming from a first-generation American of Mexican heritage, son of immigrants who came to this country illegally at one point and then earned into their citizenship.
But do you think so you saw like in the show, which is a fictional drama, you were just saying how the lady was given the spell and then she lit their swords, and you remember they all ran into battle with their lit swords, and then all their swords were quickly extinguished because they got killed by the White Walkers, by the dead people. Do you remember?
Yes, absolutely.
So this article was saying that was an immigrant population, and that the show killing them off so quickly and showing that an immigrant population is so expendable and disposable that that's racist and that's a cultural problem, and that the show shouldn't do that. And I just have to come out and say, well, that's some fucking bullshit. I mean,
I'm glad I thought you were making the case that it is racist. I'm like, we're not going to agree on this one, Nick.
That's I mean, it's a fictitious show. I mean, it's the Dothraki. The Dothraki aren't even real people. Some people don't even know that the Dothraki exist. I don't understand how this article can get traction in a major magazine and so much traffic and shares around the internet. It was posted on Yahoo, like homepage Yahoo News, etc. And so, I mean, and this is just another example of the fake outrage culture and the bizarro world, right, that we keep referencing, and one of the reasons that we named the podcast this. But that's crazy that's sort of the environment we're in, that's a mainstream take, right? That's not a hot take of some like fringe, whatever you want to call it, social justice warrior thing. That's like a mainstream article that was making the rounds, and I mean that's just crazy to me.
Yeah, it's insane to me that a journalist or whoever the heck wrote it dedicated.
We'll put a link.
Yeah, we'll put the link up, but dedicated ink to this, when if you really want to talk about, racism and the oppression of classes and groups of people, there's so many examples right now. Forget the U.S. for the time being. We have our own issues here. Look at the stuff going on overseas. Look at the stuff going on in Syria. Look at the stuff going on in Germany and Europe. Problems on all sides. I mean, why not dedicate, if this is really your angle and your beat, right? Why not dedicate that ink and that thought process and those words to a serious discussion about real problems and identify them? This is the reach. This is the take. This is the what you want to use to get people to read your article. I don't know who wrote it, but yeah, trash. Straight up trash.
I saw somebody on Twitter say, there isn't a meme in the universe to describe how fucking retarded this is.
You shouldn't use the word retarded, Nick.
That's why it was fun.
Although I use it so much, and I need to stop. So don't at me, everybody. Don't come to me and tell me I need to stop that. I shouldn't say that. I know I'm working on it. I'm imperfect. Yeah, it's one of those words. I have another one I use that nobody likes either, but it is what it is. So yeah, no, I didn't find the show racist. Yeah, it's like the Chris Rock joke. I think it was Chris Rock. It may have not been Chris Rock. Let's say it was Chris Rock. Anyway, the joke was, when they were saying that if Idris Elba didn't get the James Bond part, that was racist. And this comedian, or whoever it was, I actually don't think it was Chris Rock now. This comedian said, well, of course, secret super spy is not going to be the black guy because he would stand out in a room full of nothing but white people immediately. So he actually can't get the part. If you want to be geographically accurate, he can't get the part. He's just going to stand out. This big, handsome black guy is going to stand out in a room full of white people. It's got to be a kind of, laid back white dude that fits in with the crowd and can blend in everywhere, right? And not attract attention.
Yeah, you can't, and I've said this before, you can't mandate equality. And I see this time and time again. Like, I'll give you an example that I saw today. Like the women hockey players are, I don't know what they're doing. They're striking or they're boycotting some new league. But the fact of the matter is the league shouldn't economically exist. And it's like, if you can't attract the donors and the sponsors and the advertising, like, hey, you don't get to have a league. Like, that's economics and that's capitalism. That's not sexist. That's not racist. It's just people don't want to watch females play hockey. Like, sorry, that's not being culturally insensitive. Like, I just don't know how else to say that. Like, no one's out against you. No one is conspiring to keep the women's hockey league down. It's just that no one wants to fucking watch it.
Nobody complains about the ratio between women's strip clubs and men's strip clubs, right? It's just supply and demand.
That's it.
Sometimes. It's just sometimes supply and demand. Hey, if the women and the guys want to go see the guys, more would pop up because it'd be very profitable and there'd be somebody out there willing to make a buck out of it, right?
That's it. And you can't mandate it. And that's, I think, what is the fake part of the outrage. It's like you can try to quantify it, and that's what a lot of people are doing. Even respected think tanks and groups like big foundations and things sponsor this research, and it's like, well, you put a number on it, but it's like that doesn't fix it. And not only does it not fix it, it doesn't even necessarily mean that there's an issue. Okay, so a black guy doesn't get a James Bond part, like. Yeah, I'm not sure that what that portends in the grander scheme of world issues and the racism discussion. Like, I don't know, and I think that's how a lot of people feel. It's frustrating.
Yeah, again, there's real issues. There's real issues, and we can obviously racism, sexism, all this stuff exists. Obviously, it's absolute trash, the people that hold these opinions, and obviously there's a lot of work to do on that front. But people, please pick your battles, man. Don't pick bullshit that distracts away from real issues. And, if you have an opinion that's factual, that's merit-based, as you like to say, Nick, great. Let's talk about that and let's find ways, as a community to kind of work through that and make those things better and highlight that stuff. But, yeah, Game of Thrones, racist, that's a reach.
All right, let's talk about the measles because we skipped that last week too.
Not yet. Let's not get to the measles because I didn't get your take on the show, Nick. I need your take. Well, how'd you feel?
Oh,
this was a big episode for Thronies, right? This was a big deal. So what'd you think?
I probably thought too much about it, to be honest. I think the expectations for this episode and this season in general were set a bit too high. I think it's a bit evident that the writers need to wrap up the show. There's only like 3 episodes left, and we still have to deal with the other evil in the show, the evil queen Cersei, who wasn't at the battle last week because she's in Knight's Landing, currently sitting on the Iron Throne, and she's not supposed to be. That's what the whole show is really about, who's supposed to sit on the Iron Throne. So we have to wrap this up in the next 3 episodes. What are you going to say?
I heard she's a beast.
Oh, my God, she's a beast, and her son was a little prick too. He's dead now, but yeah, she's a beast. And so I thought the episode I thought it was good, like you. I thought it was well done. I thought killing off the Night King so quickly was a bit of a cop out, but on the same hand, like I just said, I know we got to wrap things up. I mean, it's the end of the show, and so. I don't know where I'm taking this. There's definitely been some better seasons. I think the first season of the show that got everybody addicted was better written and better paced and better developed. But the gratification of this season is the conclusion of all that development and all the character arcs. For example, the Theon Greyjoy, who was protecting the little kid in the wheelchair at the end of the episode. He charged the Night King with his sword and got killed right before Arya killed the Night King. That guy had like a complex and long character arc over the entire 8 seasons. Like, he was a Stark, and then he defected and he became a traitor, like not with the kid that was in the wheelchair.
Right.
And then he came back, like got his honor back, and then died protecting him last week. And so like his character was completely wrapped up and concluded very nicely, and that was very well done. So those are good things to see, and that's why people like the show, and that's why it's a great show.
I like it. All right, let's talk about the measles. You've been itching, no pun intended, to talk about the measles.
Well, it's just crazy because I don't know if we have talked about it, but it's here in Washington with some, I think we have talked about it, with some either anti-government or small government-minded people who don't want to take their advice to get vaccines, or with religious groups in New York, Orthodox Jews, and things not getting vaccinated. And now we have the largest outbreak, I think, in decades. And there's a ship quarantined in the Caribbean that's a Scientologist-owned ship. I guess there's like a measles outbreak on the ship, yep. And it's quarantined off. So I mean, I know you wanted to talk about it. I mean, you got to get vaccinated, but beyond that, what do you got to say?
You just fucking get vaccinated, people. Come on, man. This is 2019. Look, man, it's 2019, and I will say this, and some people won't like this, and I really don't give a fuck. If I pay taxes, right, to support public schools and public transportation and public hospitals, and you choose, and you have the right to, as a parent, you choose to not vaccinate your child, you should not have the same access to the public institutions that are funded by people that are paying into that system, and expect, like I expect, my children to not be exposed to your ignorance. I am not saying all vaccines are good. I am not saying there aren't some vaccines that are worth looking into to see if they are healthy or necessary. I am not saying that the 1,000,001 vaccines that your kid has to get when they're born, if that's the healthiest thing in the world. I'm not talking about any of that. We're talking about the fucking measles, people. This was done. This is crazy to me. So I don't have deep insight for you on this, other than please get your kids vaccinated or keep your kids away from the public. If you don't want them to be vaccinated, keep them at home and don't go anywhere.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I hate to say the same thing that you just said, but yeah, look, I'm a new parent. You have a lot of choices to make. There are a lot of state-required vaccines. A lot of states now have the checklist for each of your child that you have to have, like, the record online, and you get like the checklist of all the ones they have to get or are recommended. And like you said, maybe not all of them are necessarily, but certainly there are some that are cut and dried, like measles. Get the measles vaccine. And an example of one that is maybe not necessarily, and where there's some gray room, is when you, like, we just went through this. When you have a kid, you get, I think it's like the vitamin K shot, and they put the antibiotics in the eyes, and there might be like one more. Well, we get all the shots and we get the vitamin K, but we don't get the antibiotics in the eye, because that stems from like the late 1800s, when there wasn't widespread diagnosis and treatment of STDs. And so you would get like gonorrhea or syphilis in your eyes when you pass through the birth canal. Well, my wife doesn't have gonorrhea or syphilis, and we know this because she's been tested. So there's no way that the child could get that in the eye, so we don't need to get the antibiotic in the eye. You see what I'm saying? This is fact-based and science-based, but you certainly get the fucking measles vaccine.
You certainly get the fucking measles vaccine, people. I mean, man, like, that's it. That's it. This is not a debate. This is not, we don't all get a vote on this, although we do in this world that we live in right now. But on this one, I don't think everyone should get a vote. And if you get a vote, then you should vote to keep you and your kids, keep them home. That's all.
Next.
Yeah. And again, this just speaks to where we're at as a society, right? So many self-inflicted problems. We have so many real problems that are externally caused, right? We have climate change, whether you agree that the earth is warming or that the earth is cooling or that it's a natural cycle that happens over the course of time, because that's what happens with cycles. Whatever you believe, climate change is happening because that's just how it happens, right? We can have disagreements about why, and the best way to address that, we shouldn't have a disagreement about measles because there's an easy way to address that, and it was gone. It was done. But yeah, next. Horses, Finland. Go ahead.
I've told you about Fred and Ted, I think, where Fred needs a long bed and Ted needs a short bed. And,
yes, I think that was last week.
And sometimes Fred just has to sleep in the long bed and Ted just needs to sleep in the short bed, and it's a very simple solution.
That's all it is, man. That's all it is. All right, what do we got next?
You want to know about the horses?
I want to know about the horses.
So
anytime I see hobby horses in Finland, I want to hear about it.
You know what a hobby horse is? It's the stuffed horse head on a stick that little kids ride around their living room and pretend that they're galloping around on a horse. Most kids have one when they're little, or at least have ridden one at some point in their childhood.
Yes.
Apparently in Finland, for some time now, it's been more popular than other locations in the world, especially with young girls. But recently, in the past couple of years, it's gone from sort of something, I won't say underground, but something that wasn't really publicized and promoted and talked about as a group activity, has come to the forefront, sort of like the bronies in the United States. Have you ever seen about the bronies, the grown men who like My Little Pony?
No.
I'll put a link up.
That's creepy as fuck.
We'll talk about that another. We'll talk about that another episode. But anyway, these little girls,
they shouldn't go out either.
Are
keep their ass at home too.
They have a convention and it's in Baltimore. We'll talk about it.
Oh, I'm gonna be in Baltimore next month. Keep you away from those fuckers.
It's very interesting. Anyway, these girls are having competitions, like hobby horse riding competitions, where they go around little obstacle courses and little racetracks and jump over little jumps, all the while just pretending to ride a horse, not an actual horse. They're doing this with their legs, with a fake horse between their legs, and like by the thousands, like families go and watch. And so it was just too bizarre not to talk about. I don't know how I actually feel about it, because it's really weird. Like, you're riding a little tiny fake horse around competitively. And that's kind of really weird. But at the same time, hey, whatever.
I won't believe it's legit until I can bet on a winner using cryptocurrencies.
Oh my goodness! I had a deal for that. It went buzz.
Did you do the deal?
We were going. It was an Atari deal with the. It's a long story.
I was in on that deal too. Now that I remember.
Yeah, it ended up not playing out. Right. It was crypto horses. That's what it was. It was digitized horse racing that you bet with cryptocurrencies. With it was like the founder of Atari who developed. We were going to license his game and merge it into a company or whatever. Ended up not working out, but the crypto thing went bye too fast. But yeah, that was one of the crazy ideas in this world.
And I wonder why I couldn't find a broker to accept my stock certificate. Schools in San Francisco, Nick. What piqued your interest about schools in San Francisco?
I got to tell you just real quick that sometimes when the government tries to step in and give you a solution to a problem, it might not necessarily be the best one. And let me relate this back to measles, because again, measles is cut and dried. It's scientific. It's cells under a scope, and we know that we're combating a disease. But in San Francisco, they had a perceived, and this is perceived, you got to remember, it was a perceived segregation problem, in that they thought the San Francisco schools were too segregated. This is in the 1990s. And so they implemented a program where families could apply to go to any school, to have their kids go to any elementary school in the district. They would fill out an application and rank their schools, the order that they wanted to go to. And this was hailed as a national model, a solution for the entire country. And it was adopted in many cities. I even know friends of mine in Philadelphia who just had to go through this for their children who were entering kindergarten. They had to go visit the schools they want to go to, and they had to fill out the application and rank which one they wanted to go to first. And then there's a lottery to see if you get your top pick or not.
Question real quick.
And it all...
Question, Nick. Did
Yeah.
the entire city get to do this, or was this specific to certain parts of the city?
No, the entire city got to do this. That was the entire point. So that if you lived in a predominantly Asian neighborhood, that your kids didn't have to go to the predominantly Asian elementary school. You could apply to go to a better school in what you thought was a better neighborhood and have an equal shot at getting your kid into that school because it was a lottery system. And initially, I think it was perceived that the program was working, and like I said, it was adopted in a bunch of big cities, like a lot of them. This was the go after the sought after solution for school districts to become more integrated. But we're learning now, some 30 years later, 25, 30 years later, that in fact, San Francisco admitted last week that the program was a pretty bad failure, that the schools are more segregated now than they were before they started the problem. And I don't have an answer. I can tell you some of the reasons why. Even some of the reasons why were kind of murky. But it comes down to socioeconomic status in some cases. And I'll give you the example that was in the article that I read. It was a poor Latino family. And even though they had access to the system where they could pick the best schools for their kids to potentially go to, they didn't put the best schools at the top of their list because they didn't have the means to get their kids to that school.
Right.
So, and that was a flaw of the program. So even if their kids got accepted to the school, if it's 30 minutes away and they don't have their own car, they can't get their kid there anyway. So that was one of the flaws in the program. And then there was some stuff that the New York Times kind of glossed over. It seemed like there was some manipulation of the program. Surprise, surprise, by wealthier to-do families who were gaming the system a bit. And so it just ended up that the schools became more concentrated white, more concentrated Asian, more concentrated Black, more concentrated Latino after 30 years than before the program was implemented. And I just thought it was quite interesting.
So you mean to tell me that the wealthy, rich, same thing, let's call it the rich people, were able to get their kids in the best schools regardless of the program?
Yep.
Mind blown.
Yep.
Shit, we saw Aunt Becky will pay $500,000 to get her daughter into the best schools. Shit, if you think Aunt Becky's the only one, I got a bridge in New York to sell you.
That's exactly right. And it's come out in the past week. There was a Chinese family that paid like $1 million. There's murky details around it, but yeah, there was a family that paid even more than Aunt Becky for sure. And so, yeah, not really a surprise. Do you go back to doing it just by zip code or whatever? And what's the best solution? That's not something I'm really qualified or have a deep enough understanding of to answer. But it just struck me as not odd. It just struck me that the solution that was hailed as a really good solution turned out not to be.
It'd be nice if the people in charge of education in our country actually took the time to get to know the people that are in the education system in our country and applied standards that are uniform across the board and fair for everybody, which obviously would include access to transportation to the better schools if the goal is to expose kids to better schools. So all of that reads to me like somebody found a way to create a program, get a budget from the state or the feds or a combination of both, and then they thought, great, this is awesome because whether this works or not, I can figure out a way to pocket, in the words of our friend Angela, a shit ton of cash from this personally, leave 4 years later when my term is up, and nobody will know for 25, 30 years anyway.
He broke it down pretty quick.
That's just what it sounds like. Who knows, right?
Yeah, who knows?
All right. Well, that makes me feel even more pessimistic about our current state of affairs and the institutions in our country. So why don't we talk about some feel-good stories? Do you have any feel-good stories for me, Nick? That pissed me off now. You know how much I think our institutions are failing all of us. Unless you're rich, then we're okay. But for the most part, I think the people on the lower end are getting a raw deal like they always have, and sooner or later, that doesn't work out well. So anyway, feel-good stories, any?
You got a community party trailer, right?
I got one. I do. I love it. So I happen to live just outside of Austin in a suburban city called Round Rock, which is, I'm 15, 20 minutes away from downtown Austin. And I really don't mind paying the taxes that I pay for let me rephrase that. I don't mind paying into the tax system the amount of taxes that I pay, because I feel the services in this community, whether it's school or infrastructure, roads, what have you, all of that is top notch. It's really progressive thinking. And I don't say progressive in the liberal Democrat left leaning way. I say that as progressive, as in looking ahead and trying to find solutions that bring communities together. You mentioned the fact, I think 3 or 4 podcasts ago, that people in a rural community tend to know their neighbors a whole heck of a lot more than people that live in cities. And so this is something that our little city of Round Rock here is kind of tackling head on. And what they've done is they have a program, and again, maybe somebody's getting paid off of this too, and I shouldn't be so happy about it, but so far it looks pretty cool. So they have a program where the city will provide a trailer which has everything your neighborhood needs to host a neighborhood block party. So they get you this trailer, and it's got tables and chairs and ice chests and games. It's even got a sound system. They'll deliver this party trailer to you. You can go on the app. The city has an app. You go on there. You make your reservation. It's available year round. And get this, there's absolutely zero charge for the use of this trailer or any of the stuff that's in there. The city will deliver this trailer to your neighborhood as long as you commit to getting the community together and throwing a block party. I thought that was phenomenal. It's a small thing. I think if every community did this, people would get to know each other better. We could look out for each other's kids better. We could know our neighbors a whole heck of a lot better and make for a more inclusive community. I thought it was awesome, and it put a big old smile on my face. I was blown away.
Well, it's awesome that there's no cost, and it's awesome. It doesn't sound like there's a lot of red tape. Like, you don't need to apply for a permit. You don't need to fill out a PDF application and submit it to the Department of Central Community Planning in, building 4 Suite -A or whatever. You know what I mean? It sounds like they're making it pretty easy. You just contact the department and you get the trailer, which, it's bring it back to Game of Thrones. It's like the social lubrication, right? Brings the community together, and good things happen when that happens.
Yeah. And the website makes it clear, and I'll throw the link up where, you fill out your application, you can do it online, or you can go to City Hall. And then if you plan to close your street or hold the event in a public park, then you send that in and you just let them know that you're going to do it. But you don't need to fill out a permit application or anything like that if it's going to be on private property. So if you have this trailer in your driveway or an HOA park or something like that, you just, get all the neighbors, throw some flyers out, and get people going. And the reason that, this stood out to me is because we had a couple that recently moved from California move into our neighborhood. And, they have a young daughter that's going to the school system. So they were kind enough to come over on a Saturday morning and knock on the door and introduce themselves. And, they had this flyer, and they said, look, we want to do an annual chili cook-off. And, we'd love for you guys to come over. We made this flyer. Just let us know if you're coming. And if you'd like to bring a dish, that'd be awesome. And I said, well, how neat is that? We've been here for 6 years in this neighborhood. And never once had we seen that. Here comes this couple that just moved in, wanting to get to know their neighbors right away, making something fun of it, taking the time to draw up this cool flyer that they drew up. And they just walked around, the little 5-year-old girl, the dad and the mom just kind of walked around the neighborhood, knocking on doors and letting everybody know this was going to happen. Coincidentally, we get the flyer in the mail that morning about the block party trailer. So we shared that with them. And, now we're talking about doing a block party for the neighborhood. And, I don't know most of my neighbors, to be perfectly honest with you.
Well, there you go. Get out there, get to know.
Neat stuff. Man, well, we talked about Game of Thrones not being racist. Lil Nas X, country. The majors are making strategic investments at significant premiums, and nobody cares. What else do we got? We talked measles. We talked horses. Talked community trailers. Is there anything else, Nick?
I think that's it. Just before we go, I have to tell you the big news in Spokane is there is a
Uh-oh.
woman on trial for electrocuting squirrels.
I saw it.
Um,
Context, Nick.
uh,
Context.
I I know, it's important. I am on the side of the electrocuting squirrel woman, and
I knew
I,
you, I knew
I
you
will
would
tell
be.
you why. I will tell you why. First of all, you can kill squirrels. There's a legal season for squirrels, and you can shoot them in the face with a shotgun if you want. So, how does electrocuting a squirrel really compare to shooting a squirrel in the face with a shotgun, which is legal? Second, she was protecting her property. She had to put up an electric fence around a hickory tree. What's the matter with that? It's the squirrel's dumb fault for climbing on her electric fence. It's her property. It's her tree. It's her fence. Shut the fuck up, government. She pleaded not guilty. She's going to get off, but she's facing up to, I think it's a year in prison per squirrel and like $5,000 or $10,000 fine per squirrel, which is just ridiculous, but good enough for a laugh and a click for sure.
I love it. Breaking news on your measles case.
What is it?
The Scientology cruise ship that was quarantined in St. Lucia got a measles vaccine.
There you go.
Health officials furnished 100 free doses of measles or a measles vaccine, not of measles, to a Church of Scientology cruise ship placed under quarantine in port after the highly contagious disease was diagnosed on board, the island's chief medical officer said. So there we go. It looks like that will have a happy ending. No shade to the Scientologists. They're going to have a lot of explaining to do to their friends when they get home. You want to do stock of the week, Nick? No, go ahead.
I gave you Ivanhoe. That would be mine. Like I said, the large Chinese investment group CITIC coming in for over 600 million Canadian at a big premium. I wouldn't bet against Robert Friedland, especially in any sort of resource bull market. But given the assets he controls, certainly worth a look here.
I like it. I like it. More breaking news. I don't know how to feel about this. Fuck. So I often call Dennis Gartman the ultimate contrarian signal, right? If he says buy, you should probably sell. If he says sell, it's probably time to back the truck up. So he just said he's all in on commodities. It probably means Nick is right. We have a couple of more months of pain in the commodity space. He'll probably tap out in 2 months, and then we'll be off to a ripping and roaring bull market. We're not there yet. So stay tuned for that. The other interesting point that I want to highlight really quick is Tesla's main person in charge of securing critical minerals for Teslas and battery packs and everything is warning of upcoming shortages in nickel, copper, and lithium. And I will put up a link to that article. It's an excellent article. A small example of something that people usually wouldn't associate with copper demand, for example, is smart systems. So like Alphabet has their Nest thermostat, right? And Amazon has like Alexa, the personal assistant. So right now, it's anticipated that those smart systems consume about 38,000 tons per day of copper. By 2030, that number is supposed to be 1.5 million tons of copper. That happens quick, folks. It's 2019. We're talking 11 years from now. So I'll put a link up, but yeah, copper, nickel, lithium, it should be fun.
The electrification of everything is one of the real mega trends in this fake world. And I saw a news story this morning that for the past 19 years, NASA has been getting fake copper, not up to or aluminum, aluminum not up to the spec that they thought it was. And they attribute the failure of 2 missions to the inferior copper or the inferior aluminum that they were receiving. And so these metals are an intricate part of the daily part of our lives. It's underestimated by nearly everyone how important they are and how precarious the supply is and just how much of them we're going to need as everything in our lives becomes digitized and connected and cloudified. And Dennis Cartman doesn't wear socks with his suit and his leather loafers, and I think that's very weird.
Fuck that guy. I'm going to just leave that right there and not opine, because I'm sure I'll be seeing some of you at conferences soon, not wearing socks with your suits and no judgments.
Don't ask me.
We're not taking
I was going to
pictures
say,
together.
don't ask me why. Don't ask me why I'm looking at Dennis Cartman's ankles.
I won't ask you this week, Nick, why you were looking at Dennis Cartman's ankles, and I'm going to try to make sure that the next time I see you in person, my ankles are covered.
All right. And if you remember, I'll give you a funny Dennis Cartman story next week.
I love it. I love it. Let's do it. So I don't have a stock of the week, but I do have a stock that you should peek at. It's up about 150% over the past day and a half on huge trading volume. Radius Gold intercepted 44 meters, grading 12.38 grams per ton gold and 309.3 grams per ton silver at their Amalia project in Chihuahua, Mexico. The program is operated by Radius. It's actually funded by Pan American Silver. So and this is still early stage, right? The company now has a market cap of roughly $35 million Canadian. So there's still upside. However, it is up over 150%. I'm not telling you to go buy the stock. I'm telling you, take a peek at it and keep an eye at it. Ultimately, if the project does have merit, as it appears early on that it does, Pan American Silver will be the large beneficiary, as they have the option to earn into, I believe, just over 70% of the project. It's actually 75% of the project if they advance it to the preliminary feasibility stage. So that's an interesting one. Incredible grades. They've had high grade hits at that project before. So I think we got a pretty good idea, 2 dimensions anyway, of what that looks like. And we'll see what comes after this piece of news. Interesting stuff though.
And looks like Pan American down 5% at, just below 52-week lows today. So might be an interesting way to take a look at it.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Well, I think that's it. Nick, it's been insightful and interesting as always. Anything to add?
Go get yourself a meatless Whopper, which is no Whopper at all.
And with that last bit of wisdom, everybody, have a great week. Love each other. Be nice to each other. Do something fun for yourself. And have an awesome week. Episode 17 of Bizarro World.